Do you struggle with feelings of hopelessness, sadness, irritability, agitation, or just feeling numb? Welcome to Well Jawn Wednesdays. I am your host, Coach Ty, and this is where we have real talk about real wellness for the real you. So today's episode is going to be touching on mental health. And as you can see, I don't have my cue cards or anything this time because I wanted to really be a heartfelt conversation. As you know, my goal with Well Jawn Wednesdays is to bring education to you, make it understandable, break down some things that we need to touch on. But at the same time, I want this to be a source of encouragement, empowerment, and just being honest without it always feeling very educational. So as we touch on mental health, it's funny. I was thinking about this as I was preparing for today's show, where in the past we've talked a lot about physical health problems. We talked about high blood pressure. We talked about cervical cancer. We talked about endometriosis. And I realized, wow, I haven't touched on mental health. And honestly, it's so hard to get a handle on your physical health conditions if your mental health is not together, if it's not healthy. For people who are diabetics, one of the reasons why they may struggle managing their diabetes is because they may be emotional eaters. So they're eating a lot to cope with what they feel. And in turn, that is going to bring their sugars up, which will affect their management of diabetes. And if we're overeating, if we're emotionally eating, that has a lot to do with our mental and our emotional health. So that's just an example of how it's important, of course, for me to want to touch on these physical health conditions that that you may have to struggle with. But at the same time, I really want to dedicate the next 20 to 30 minutes to just really talk about mental health, what it is, what falls under that umbrella, what are some symptoms, how can we cope, and how can we continue talking about it in a way that feels organic and relatable and not just in a way that just feels like, wow, I've heard that before, that mental health is, we have to get a handle on it. Like, no, I think in today's world, there's so many stressors that we have. And sometimes we're just so busy trying to keep up, but we're not really checking in with ourselves to make sure that we are as healthy mentally as we need to be. So when we talk about mental health, there's a few different specific disorders or conditions that fall under that umbrella. I'm sure you've heard of anxiety. I'm sure you've heard of depression. It's also bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, maybe even ADHD. So these are just a few. There's a lot more, but I feel like these are the ones that are most common. So these are the ones that I want to touch on today and just give you a little insight into how you can really check in with yourself to see if you struggle with these disorders and if it's something that you may need to talk to a trusted friend or loved one about, or even your doctor, your primary doctor, for starters. So let's talk about anxiety and depression, because a lot of times they go hand in hand. So anxiety and depression are mental health conditions, again, that are very common in men and women. And they can definitely bring us physical symptoms, such as, for example, with anxiety, a lot of people feel like they're on edge a lot, or that they're like worried about something that's about to happen, but they don't know what that is that they're worried about. They may feel very jittery. They may feel like their heart rate, like their heart is always pounding. They may feel as if they are just kind of like out of control, but really have a hard time understanding why they feel that way. And then when we talk about depression can cause us to feel very down. And depression does not always mean crying or being emotional. Sometimes when you're struggling with depression, you may feel just numb, that nothing is bringing you joy. You may not want to eat, so you have loss of appetite. You may be sleeping a lot more than you normally would as a form of escapism, or you may not be sleeping at all because you just are restless throughout the night and are struggling with insomnia. When we go ahead and talk about bipolar disorder, it's high highs and low lows. And when I say that, I mean when you are manic during this, like if you are bipolar, or let's say you just noticed these symptoms, but you never got officially diagnosed. When you're bipolar and you're manic, that means you are like on 100 all the time. You're not sleeping. You may engage in risky behaviors, whether it's risky sexual behaviors or even, let's say, money. You're just spending money frivolously. Let's say you start a project in your house. You just are on go all of the time. But then when your manic phase is over, you drop down and now you are depressed. And this is not depression that some people are able to manage with their day-to-day responsibilities. This depression is like you can't get out of bed. Okay, so that's why I say high highs and low lows. When you're up, you're on 100, and when you're down, you're at 0. And you may just have this roller coaster where you feel like, why is there some days that I just feel like I can't contain myself, but there's other days that I can't get out of bed. So that's bipolar disorder. Schizophrenia is one that is very extreme. And schizophrenia is it can be definitely attributed to a genetic connection. So if you have family members or you had grandparents or even your parents that had schizophrenia, it is possible that you can have that as well. And that one, there's a few different characteristics, but the most extreme ones are hallucinations. So you're seeing things that aren't there. You're also hearing things that aren't there, and you're just not really present. Your mind and what you believe to be true is just not realistic. So those are 4 that just fall under that umbrella of mental health disorders. But again, there's several more. But I just want to speak on those because, especially with the anxiety and the depression, those are extremely common in today's world. As I was doing my research, I found that about 1 in 4 people, adults, I'm talking about adults here, 1 in 4 adults struggle with one or both of these mental health conditions like anxiety and depression. But there's only about that's about 7 million people. As I looked into the statistics for Black people specifically, it's about 17% as a whole. But that's 7 million people. That's a lot of people that are struggling with anxiety and depression. And I believe 1 in 3 of them are not even seeking treatment. So that's a lot of people. If we're talking about 7 million total, but then we're breaking it down a little more, there's a lot of people that are struggling with these feelings and they're not getting help. And they are just living in agony because they know they don't feel well, but they're just powering through when they could be getting some help. So there's 5 pillars. When we talk about mental health, there's 5 things that all of us should really be paying attention to that will allow us to get a understanding of where we stand with our mental health. 5 things total, and let's go through each one. The first one I want to talk about is how are we eating? Okay, earlier when I mentioned what condition was that? It was depression. I talked about a possible loss of appetite, but I also talked about overeating. So if we notice again with our eating habits that our appetite is gone, and you know what your baseline is, you know what your norm is. So if you're noticing that you really don't have an appetite, you just are not interested in eating, you're losing a lot of weight, but you also don't feel quite like yourself, you should be paying attention to that. And even maybe, let's say, keeping a log of it, because these symptoms, especially the 5 ones we're about to go over, normally we try to compare them or ask that you would think about it over a 2-week period. Okay, there are some days that, let's say you had a busy day or you're stressed or you're just not in the mood to eat, it's possible that you have just a temporary loss of appetite. But if you're noticing after 2 weeks total that you are just not eating the way you normally eat, or let's say you're overeating, you're like binge eating, and it's really just to kind of make you feel better, whether it's sweets or if you're like a salty chip pretzel kind of person, or even like full-blown meals, like you're just eating because it makes you feel better, that's something that you should pay attention to. The next thing is, how are you sleeping? A lot of times, again, as I said earlier, there's either you're not sleeping at all, so you're struggling with insomnia, or you are oversleeping. You are sleeping way past the time that you would normally sleep because you just maybe can't get out of bed, or you just feel tired, like you're just drained. The third thing is, how are you relaxing? And when I say relaxing, I don't mean sleeping. I mean, are you able to just settle down? Or do you feel anxious all the time? And when you feel that way, are you getting up and doing things because you feel like you just have to be active? The fourth thing is, how are you moving your body? How are you exercising? Are you exercising, or like, are you active, or are you just isolated? Are you just staying in a house? And again, this is over a 2-week period where there's going to be days that these things are going to be affected. You may not be active, or you may need a restful weekend and you just don't want to go anywhere. But if you're noticing that you're normally someone that is out, you're about, you're spending time with friends, you're spending time with family, and you just can't get it together, that's something to pay attention to. And then last one, number 5, is going to be, how are you, I kind of referenced it already, how are you socializing? Are you spending time with friends? Are you spending time with family? Are you not wanting to interact with anyone? Are you just kind of isolating yourself in this little bubble because you just do not feel up for talking to people, and you just want to kind of be in your own little cocoon away from the world? So those 5 things, how you're eating, how you're sleeping, how you're relaxing, how you're moving your body, and how you're socializing, those are the 5 things that we all should really be checking in with ourselves about, to see if our mental health is suffering. And don't feel guilty, don't feel bad, don't feel ashamed if you're noticing, wow, over the past month or so, I have been struggling in a few of those areas. I don't feel quite like myself. And for us ladies, we have hormones, right? We have periods, and they really do affect our moods. They affect our eating habits. They just affect how we feel. Sometimes we may feel like we just cannot get a handle on our emotions. We might be crying at everything, or we might be super just agitated. So I want us as women to also understand that you should really be tracking your periods and knowing around what time of the month you feel like you're not yourself, because that may not mean you have anxiety or depression. That may just simply mean that this is your PMS. This is your premenstrual syndrome. This is how your body is now starting to prepare, or how it deals with the fluctuation of hormones as you begin your menstrual cycle. So for all my ladies out there, and even my younger girls, if you get a period and if you got your period and you notice that you're just not feeling quite like yourself certain times of the month, just keep track of it. So that way you say, okay, I know my period is coming. This is why I feel like this. Okay. And like I said, if you notice that these feelings are coming when your period is not on or not due to come on, I think that's worth talking to someone about, especially your primary doctor. And I know almost every time I record Well Jawn Wednesdays, I'm always talking about a primary doctor. And I need to like get a t-shirt that says, have you spoken to your PCP? Because it's just really important, right? Like, it's important that you have a good connection with your primary doctor, because they are going to be the ones that you are going to be able to go to say something is wrong, whether that affects your mental health or your physical health. So I've said this before also, it's not a matter of just going to your doctor every year, like, okay, I'm gonna just go get this exam done, get blood work done, whatever. You should really have a good connection, a good rapport, a professional rapport with your doctor, because then they will listen to you. They will also get to know you as a patient so that they will also be able to recognize when something is wrong. Okay. So I just really want it. I mean, obviously men can't get periods. So this is not even related to the PMS thing. This is just related in general to your norm, that if you have a doctor who you feel comfortable with, they will be the ones to advocate for you, or they may think of something that you don't even know about to say, hey, let's check for that, to make sure that everything is okay. All right. So as we talk about mental health, I mentioned some of the symptoms. I mentioned the sleeping habits, the eating habits. I even mentioned levels of agitation, irritability, withdrawal, or like isolation, also feeling numb. Okay. And so make sure as I'm talking about these things, you kind of just think about how you've been feeling and seeing if this is something that applies to you. Besides your primary doctor, we also have other ways of coping because life is stressful, right? I mean, it's just something going on all the time, whether it's personally, whether it's nationally, like in this country, or even globally. I mean, there's been a lot of natural disasters happening. There's been a lot of political just tension. Okay. And we're hearing about all of this stuff because we have access to it 24/7. And sometimes it's hard to detach, but that's one of the things that we have to understand. Like, what can we do better as individuals to feel better? If you're noticing that your heart rate goes up, or you just feel super anxious every time you're watching the news, or if you're scrolling on social media, I think that's something to pay attention to, and for you to create boundaries around that, because it's not healthy for you to feel anxious all the time, especially if you know what causes your anxiety. So I think it's important for you to limit what's giving you anxiety. And that doesn't mean obviously that you shouldn't be in a know and that you shouldn't be well informed on what's going on wherever you are. But I just think there's a point in time where we have to take care of ourselves. And if we want to check in, we choose to do it at a time of day when we feel the most relaxed. And then we give ourselves a limit. Like, okay, if I'm going to be looking online and tuning in to just what's happening in the country, or I'm going to be watching the news, I'm going to give it a good 10 minutes and then that's going to be it. Because if we're always in that heightened state of awareness, that causes our body and our central nervous system to always be in that like fight or flight mode. So our heart rate is going up. We're ready to do something. We're ready to either fight whatever we think that threat is, or we're ready to run because we feel like we're anxious. Whatever we're taking in is making us feel on edge and anxious. So I think it's important that not only we stay informed, but we also know what we can and cannot take and create boundaries around that. Okay. The other thing is, it's really important for everyone, if possible, to talk to somebody. There's professionals, of course. There's therapists. There's wellness coaches. There's psychiatrists. If you are dealing, or if you're struggling with a mental health condition that's pretty intense, like schizophrenia, and maybe even ADHD. But there's also times where we may have friends or even loved ones who we trust, and they make us feel better. They give us advice. They are able to kind of calm us down. And maybe you have that where you could do that for each other. I think it's important to talk to people and say, hey, are you okay? You know, I noticed that we haven't been hanging out as much. I noticed that you feel like you kind of have a short fuse. You know, it seems like little things are really getting to you. So I just want to check in and really make space for that person to be honest, not just ask like in a very casual way, oh, you good? Like, no, like create a space, a safe space where you both could sit down and you can say, hey, are you okay? Because I noticed this. And of course, it's going to be up to the person to decide whether or not they want to be honest about what it is that's going on. But I think when we make safe spaces for people, they may feel like, wow, no one's ever asked me that, or no one has ever really cared that much. And then, of course, it gives you an opportunity too to maybe tell them about what you're going through. So you become safe spaces for each other. And I also think it's important that if we do have a go-to person, not a professional, but like a friend or a family member or even our partner or spouse, I think it's important to ask before we kind of dump whatever we're going through on them. We ask them like, hey, do you have the space to hold what I want to say to you? Like, do you have the capacity to really deal with what I want to get off my chest? Because I think sometimes we may go to talk to somebody, but we don't know what they may be going through. So they may feel like, wow. And of course, if it's people we care about, and we go to tell them something, that's going to weigh on them. Like they're going to, if they love us, they're going to be like, wow, my friend or my sister is struggling with that. Like that doesn't make me feel good, but they may have their own problems or issues that they're also struggling with. So it's important for us to first ask like, hey, do you have the ability, I kind of want to share something like, is that okay? Do you have time? Do you feel like you can emotionally handle anything right now? And that's another reason. And if let's say they say no, that's another reason why it's important for you to get in contact with a professional, especially a therapist or even a wellness coach, so that you have that dedicated time and you're working with a professional. So it's a very objective person. Our friends and family members are good, but we know them very personally, right? But sometimes it's helpful to get somebody who knows us, but in a professional sense, so that they can kind of have a bird's eye view on what's going on versus sometimes, again, if we have family and friends, they're very like close up on us. So their opinions and their suggestions may not be what we need at that particular time. Okay. As a wellness coach myself, there are a few different areas when I work with clients that I really talk to them about, because I know that even though I want to help with the physical health conditions, like I said earlier, the mental and the emotional also goes along with it. So that's why with my clients that I work with, I really discuss and encourage whole body healing, which includes your mental health, your emotional health, your physical health, your spiritual health, and also your social health. All of those things need to be healthy as a whole for you to be healthy and whole as a person, if that makes sense. I know that was a mouthful, but it's not going to be that easy or that effective if I'm only touching on your physical health and what you're struggling with without really taking into consideration what you're dealing with as a person. Because again, life is stressful for us all and everything happens so fast and we're always on go all of the time. But we have to make space and make time to kind of slow down a little bit. And if that means you need to work with a professional, I think that that's something that is a good thing. I think we need to break the stigma. I know maybe years ago, if you saw a therapist, it would be a thing of like, oh, well, you need to go sit on a couch. And it was said in a way of like, oh, you're crazy or something is wrong with you. And you're not crazy and something is not wrong with you. You just need help. And there's a lot of times where you may start to see your therapist or let's say even a wellness coach, and you may need to really have appointments, let's say weekly or bi-weekly, because at that time you're going through a very stressful event or, you're just really overwhelmed. But then as you continue to work with that licensed professional, then you feel like, wow, like I'm getting the tools that I need. I know every 2 weeks I have this standing appointment Wednesday at 5:00. I'm going to get to address everything I'm going through. I get to just talk about it. And then, wow, now I don't need to be seen every 2 weeks. I need to be seen once a month, because by me expressing myself, by me getting these things off of my chest, I feel better already. And that's one thing we don't understand, the power of just talking about things. Of course, that depends on like your communication style. There's a lot of people who grew up in households where you didn't talk about anything. Everything was swept under the rug. Or it was just, all right, go take a nap, go to sleep, or ain't nothing wrong with you. Like, especially in the Black community, like we have just kind of suffered through so much. And I always have to bring up our trauma in this country because that trauma stays with us. That's generational trauma. Our ancestors went through a lot and we are still carrying their pain. We're still carrying their hurt. And then honestly, I mean, this is a fact. We still are dealing with the systemic racism that started with them. It's not as if now it's over and okay, everything's great. No, we're still having to live through not being treated fairly or being judged inaccurately. So we're carrying so much with us. So we have to unload it at some point, because if we don't, then we're going to just be more agitated over the little things. Then we're going to be numb, or we're going to use substances like alcohol and even drugs to try to cope with these feelings, when that's really not helping in the long term. That's just really allowing us to suppress it even more. And since I touched on alcohol, as you all know, I am very excited about this alcohol-free journey that I'm on, but also this alcohol-free journey that I'm encouraging others to try and experiment with, just because a lot of times when we feel anxious, we sometimes drink because we think that, okay, if I have a little drink, it's going to settle me down. And it's such a common thing, right? We had a stressful day at work. We're going through something in our personal lives. We just go for the bottle. And at the time, it will help. I'm going to be honest. It will kind of settle you down. If you were very nervous, it might make you a little more calm, make you a little more confident. But the thing is, once our body starts to kind of get rid of the alcohol that we just consumed, then we go into like a mini withdrawal. And this is another reason why I want to bring so much awareness to alcohol use, is because I know that we've been using it for certain things, but we don't really know the truth about what's happening. So when we have a drink because we're nervous and then we feel good, but as that alcohol is leaving our system, it then causes a withdrawal effect, because it depresses our central nervous system, and then we get anxious all over again. So now what do? We get the bottle, and then it's like a vicious cycle. So there's so many other ways to deal with stress and anxiety. And if we're going to talk about depression, that conversation definitely needs to be had with a professional, because there are some people that require medication, and that's okay too. That's your business. This is your life. This is your mental health. So please do not feel as if something is wrong with you because your depression has gotten to a point where you need medication. Of course, there's other things that we can pay attention to try to get a handle on. As I mentioned, try and think about how much we're using alcohol as a way to cope, and understand that if we're dealing with anxiety, we're just on that vicious cycle if we keep drinking to help cope with the anxiety. We also have to be mindful of the substances we consume, and not just alcohol or drugs, but even caffeine. Caffeine makes us kind of excited, and that's the whole purpose. It helps us to focus. When it's used in like good amounts, it helps us to focus. It may give us a little energy. But if you are a caffeine person, and let's say somebody that drinks like Red Bulls and other type of like energy drinks, understand that that can also be contributing to your anxiety. Also, some foods we eat, making sure that we're taking in fruits and vegetables, making sure we're drinking water. These are all things that we can just do already, right? To make sure we're trying to keep our body as regulated as possible. But if we're noticing that we have a well-balanced diet, we are moving our bodies, we are getting that exercise in, we're doing all of the things, but we still just don't quite feel like ourselves, that is when we need to now talk to someone and say, this has been going on for a while now. I have changed up some things, but I'm not quite understanding why I'm still struggling with this. Can you, make some recommendations? And please understand, and this is another thing I always encourage on Well Jawn Wednesdays, you are your own advocate, okay? If you go into your provider's office and you let them know that you are struggling with your mental health and they want to just immediately give you depression medication or even anxiety medication, but you're not comfortable with that, please know that you have the option to say, no, I don't want to try that yet. Is there anything else that you would recommend? Or you can even ask for like a trial run. Like, okay, I did try all these other things. It didn't work. I do think I need a little more help. Can we see how I feel after 3 months? Because medications do take, especially meds that like antidepressants and anti-anxiety meds, sometimes they may take a little while to take effect. So you can't just try them for like 2 weeks and think you're going to be just feeling, at 100%. You need to give it a little more time. But you can always ask, hey, can we just do this for maybe 3 or 4 months? Because I don't want to really take them long term if I don't have to. And just talk to your provider and see what your options are. There's so many different options out there, and you definitely have a say in how you treat your mental health issue at that time. Okay, it's definitely not the best thing to kind of go on and go off meds. You kind of want to stay consistent. But again, this is something you and your provider can talk about, because if you are taking one med for 3 or 4 or 5 months and you feel as if it's not helping, then there may need to be a switch up on your medication, or the regimen that your provider is suggesting for you. Okay. So I just really feel like it's important to keep having this conversation, because mental health is so important. Of course, if you're struggling, you're not alone. There's so many people who just don't quite feel like themselves. Of course, if you feel like it's getting to the point where you feel suicidal or even homicidal, you should definitely be talking to somebody, a therapist, a psychiatrist, a doctor about that, because your safety is priority. Of course, the safety of others is priority as well. But if you're having thoughts of hurting yourself, you should talk to somebody about that, because again, you're not the only one struggling with those thoughts. I know that it's not pleasant to talk about. It doesn't feel good to talk about. It doesn't feel normal to talk about, but we live in a crazy world, and there's a lot of hopelessness out there. There's a lot of sadness. There's a lot of despair. There's a lot of distress. There's a lot of violence going on. There's just a lot of trauma happening. And not only is trauma happening all around us on a regular basis, but there's a lot of times we have trauma from our upbringing, from our childhood. We might have witnessed something. We might have experienced something, and we never talked about it. No one ever asked, how are you doing? How are you feeling? And we're just carrying that with us, and that will affect our mental health. So it's easier, as painful as it may be, it's better for us to get it off of our chest, be honest about it. Of course, make sure you're choosing wisely who you are sharing information with, so that way you feel like your secrets are safe and that you're going to get the help that you need. You're not going to get someone that just wants to gossip or wants to spread your business, because then what are you going to do? You're not going to want to talk about anything anymore because you don't feel like you can trust anyone. So please make sure you send this to someone who you feel may need help. If someone has spoken to you or even has come up to you and said, can I talk with you? I don't feel right. If this is a friend or family member, please try to do your best to just hold space for them. We all have busy lives. We all have things going on. And sometimes we may not be in the place to receive that, but it's better to let someone open up to you and get it off their chest, and you direct them to the right channels, than to just let them suffer in silence. Okay. Please feel free to comment. Please subscribe to this channel. We have so many exciting things coming soon. I'm so happy I was able to touch on mental health, because like I said, I realized wow, I've been given so much good information about our health and managing certain conditions and problems or challenges, but I didn't touch on mental health. And that's important. So thank you so much for tuning in. I look forward to hearing from you. If it's anything that you need to reach out to me for, please know my virtual door is always open. These conversations, I'm passionate about helping. I'm passionate about creating safe spaces, especially for women. So I am here. Utilize me as much as you need to. And I will talk to you next time.